Can we just talk? Just you and me. Thank you again for joining us for Marriage Investment. This is episode 14. It is a special part 2 Father's Day edition. We have two great gentlemen, Pastor Tom Kakadelis and Bishop Ronald Scott. You heard in part 1 about the influence of their fathers and a little bit from me. And we're going to transition and talk about and hear their journey as a father. We're going to begin with Pastor Tom, his journey as a father, and he's going to give us some information, and we're going to glean and enjoy that. And then Bishop Scott, and we're kind of volley back and forth, very similar to what we did in episode 13. I don't want to lose any more time. Pastor Tom.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, you're not losing time with when you
Thank
get
you.
to share your story, because all of us, every one of us as dads has a story. And the journey that we've gone through, as we talked about in session 1, part 1, was the influence of our own fathers and how that shaped our understanding of what it meant to be a father. And then we were both, all of us, the three of us, and many listening, have been blessed with the opportunity of being a father.
Yes.
And I think that's what you don't have any promises will occur. But when the circumstances come about, you realize being a dad is a very different experience than being a son. And so transitioning to that understanding is why our understanding of the scriptures are so important, because the scriptures tell us that Jesus, they said, well, how can we know the Father? We've never seen him. And his answer was, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Mm.
And for many of you, I've witnessed, I didn't know your dads, but I've seen you. And by seeing you, I know your dad. I know a lot about your dad. And it tells me a lot about the importance of what it means to be mentored. Regardless of it's the person that was your biological dad, it might be somebody that comes into your life and influences you. So I want to give a shout out real quick to a friend of mine, Don Surratt, who just finished his book. His dad died early. His mother was killed in a very tragic accident, and he was adopted by a white man. And his book title is The Lessons My White Father Taught Me. And if you ever get a chance to read the book, you'll find out a lot about what it meant, because he didn't know anything about what it meant to be white or black. But when his father adopted him, he didn't teach him about his color. He taught him about what it meant to be a father. And so I think that's why this is such an important experience for us, because I don't think fatherhood had anything to do with the differences in our races or our color. It has all to do with our relationships and what we've been able to glean from both the lessons learned in life and for what the scriptures can do to inform us as a parent. And so there are a couple things I think that made a difference early on. Is I realized when I got married, I didn't think I was even ready for marriage, let alone being a father. But when I said something to my dad about it, he said, well, now that you're married, you don't get to pick if you're ready or not. Now that you're married, you're ready to be a father. And I said, well, then I'm going to need some help. And he said, well, that's why we're here for each other. That's why we have to be an encouragement to these young men, because I don't think many men aspire to be dads or fathers because of their bad experiences or their lack of experiences. So it's a great opportunity for us to speak into this subject, because I know that as a dad, the big part of being a dad for me was having a woman that was the mom to my kids. And I think she helped me be the father that I was, or what I needed to be, because she could see it from an adult perspective. I couldn't see it. And so it was early on praying with my kids and learning about what it meant to read the scriptures to my kids that even now were so important. I think the other thing that I've learned along the journey early on was the importance of lessons that of telling my kids about my own failures. I think I could have done more of that. I think I could have shared even more of things that I didn't do well, I didn't do right, and I learned from. And I think young people today need to know that perfection is not the goal, but faithfulness. And that if we can get to faithfulness, then we can learn a lot of lessons that we wouldn't normally say learn from something somebody tells us. Sticking with something's hard. I mean, it's just hard.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what parenting is, and that's why when I listen to pastors talk about his jumping into four children of somebody else's kids. I mean, you don't get an opportunity to wade in the shallow end of the pool. You're just in the deep end right quick. And so that was really a big part, I think, of what parenting was, because we were married 4.5 years before we had a child. And then right after that, 2 years later, we had another one. And I think that if I have a regret, I wished I'd have had more kids. And I think that was something that a bigger family I would have enjoyed. But I think at the time, being a pastor and traveling and doing a lot of preaching other places, it was difficult for me to be around. And I was afraid I couldn't be what I needed to be. So I think presence, prayer, and the idea of following other men that were parenting their children. I looked for models, much like Bishop said earlier, looking for models that could help me along my own journey.
Wow. Appreciate that. Bishop?
Yes, that's good. Thanks for sharing, Pastor Tom.
Yes, thank you.
As I close out the last session talking about being a blended family, things of that nature, and having been married before, and I just want to, encourage brothers and fathers out there that you can relate to that on a personal level. But one thing I took from the first marriage until now was me. I was a consistent denominator. So if something had to be tweaked or changed or whatever, it needed to be me. So history wouldn't repeat itself. But the family dynamic for me on this journey, it's been an awesome journey. Like I said, my children helped me because you're talking about going into a blended situation. We never use the word step. We always use the word blended. And God just told us that from the get-go, blending. And my wife was more spiritually mature than me at that time because she had been in the church and been committed and had a greater understanding of scripture. So she helped me walk through the application of the dynamic. And in raising the kids, understanding that those are 4 different personalities. So each one of them got to be addressed according to that personality. And I'm like, wow, I'm coming from being single for a while, and I'm a military man. I'm still active duty, and I'm used to what I say, that's it. Well, I got to go through any explanation, and y'all. So I had to learn that because she had been teaching them a certain way that I needed to hear and listen to what they had to say. So a lot of times as parents, we want it one way. We it's my way or the highway. Well, a lot of children today, and William and I, we work over in the prison. A lot of them are over there today because the parent would listen, and the decision they made after that. But by listening to my children, I'm like, okay, I had to start seeing things from a different perspective. Fatherhood is a ministry.
Yes.
Fatherhood is a ministry. So I had to learn how to minister to my children, to our children, and understand that, yeah, they flawed, but guess what? I'm flawed. But one thing that we never did and was something we wanted to teach them. Never badmouth your parent, so they were not allowed to talk negative about their biological, because they never heard me talk about what my father did not do. Matter of fact, just a side note on that, I'm actually the caregiver for my father now. So it wasn't about what he didn't do, it's about what God said you're supposed to do. It says you honor. So we were teaching them to honor their biological, and one of the challenges also for that wasn't a challenge, but an opportunity, that when he came around, I showed them how you're supposed to carry yourself. If you're ever faced with the situation, you don't hold any of that against the person. You show them love. You show them, so you're really showing the person love because it's the love of Christ, but you're really teaching your children. Every opportunity is an opportunity to treat your children. The word tells us to train up child up in the way they should go when they grow, they shall not depart. But that ain't just about talking to them. It's real more so about how you're living before them.
Yes.
And I grasped that because God had prepared me in a sense with the military. Your soldiers watch you. You can't tell them one thing and then do another. And so that was a concept I used, even though my wife had to check me years later. I came home one day, hadn't taken my military hat off yet. She said, "Hold up, we're not your soldiers." That was a check-in moment. I had not shifted out of the work mode. I had not shifted out of the work mode. And that was a revelatory day for me. And I carry it still today, how to disconnect from what I just left from until now. And pushing the children with education. I was one of those that, we talk about fathering, there are different dynamics of fathering. You teach them responsibilities, but guess what? I taught them how to clean. I didn't tell them to clean. I taught them. I got on my hands and knees and physically taught them, and they would let me do it. I said, "No, you just watch. I need you to learn first." I taught them how to iron. Look at what thread said, what kind of material it is, what the heating said. I got into the details with them, but I did it for a purpose. It wasn't about how good they can iron, about how good they're going to be able to clean. It was about paying attention to detail in life, so that when you grow and you have your family, you don't let the little things just slip by. You pay attention to those things. So parenting is a broad umbrella, and it's a 24/7 job. And
yes, it is.
I took it as an honor that God entrusted me with our children to raise them up in the way that they should go, and that's what we've done. Now, as Pastor Tom said earlier, ain't nobody perfect, just as flawed as I can be. But my flawness don't take away from my love for Christ,
Amen.
And so and my relationship with the Holy Spirit. So I understand that in raising them, this journey has been an awesome journey. I have no regrets. Pastor Tom, contrary to you, I'm satisfied with the 5 I got. I'm good.
Well, I can understand. If I'd have gotten to 5, brother, I would have probably said I've been satisfied too. But I think what happened was I learned something from what you were saying just there about that, because the examples that my kids remember are the times I was with them doing things. Mm-hmm. And I think that reminds me of how important it is to not just explain something or do or to do it, but to do it with them. And that mentoring, that relationship, that example of servanthood, I think spills over in a lot of other areas of our lives. So there's no doubt your kids have learned some things that by example they would not have learned. Now, my kids are glad I did not teach them how to iron, because I still to this day don't do that very well at all. Now I'll do it, but I have a warning on me when I do. It said this may not end well. But that said, there are other things that we learned to do. Our parents had influence. We have certain interests, and our kids can learn certain things. I think the other thing is that we need to be willing for our children to learn from other people. Yep. And that gives them an understanding. And sometimes it's grandparents but I had a huge influence on my life as a young person about teaching me. My uncle taught me two things my dad didn't do and didn't like to do. My dad didn't like to fish, and he didn't like water. In fact, he was scared of water. But my uncle taught me how to fly fish and how to spin fish and how to spin cast. So I learned, and I still to this day have fly rods and fly bait that my uncle gave me. And I still have it, and I still go fly fishing with him in my head. And the other thing he taught me was how to play chess. And it taught me a lesson about being a parent that I think is valuable. My kids know the rules of hockey. Neither one of my kids can play hockey. They don't have any interest in playing hockey. I never played hockey. I managed a team for a while, but I never played hockey. But I took my kids to hockey games because I said, listen, you will know the rules. Because if you're going to have an intelligent conversation with somebody, you need to know the rules as they understand them. And that way you broaden yourself. You give them permission to learn from others and to be influenced by others under guidance and direction, obviously, for spiritual values. But by and large, the principles around culture and cultural things that are important to us, you learn from other people. And so it was so important that my dad gave me opportunities to learn from others. And I now have given that opportunity and permission to my own kids and grandkids, because they learn, they're so impressionable at those young ages. And we have the opportunity to impact their lives in such a way that their parents can't even do it sometimes. Sometimes their parents have to defer to us because our gray hair, or maybe my lack of it, or whatever I got left, is something that sometimes as grandparents we can influence them, and I think that really does make a huge impact as a father on your kids.
A nugget before you speak, William. When you said something, Pastor Tom, about laying down rules and things of that nature, boundaries. For you all, men of God, or brothers, fathers that may be listening, and if you have a blended family, that's a dynamic that is so important.
Yes.
You and your spouse get together and do the boundaries and the rules. Y'all agree in private offline on how you're going to navigate this, because kids are in a resistant mode initially, because they're still dealing with the trauma of things just coming out of the other relationship into this new dynamic. And so you really, you shouldn't just assume and just operate from what you think. Sit down, you go before the Lord and ask God for wisdom and guidance, but you set down some rules and some boundaries on how you're going to address certain situations when they occur. They're children. These things are going to occur, and one thing my wife, she did in her with her smart self, and she's still smart and beautiful. But anyway, that's a side note.
Yes, sir.
I became a disciplinarian. She pushed them toward me, and my style of discipline. It got, Pastor Tom, it's funny, and the kids will tell you right now. They all grown, got their own kids. They'll tell you right now. They used to say, "Mom, just tell him to beat us," because he be talking and talking and talking. Because that was my style of discipline. I gave them extremes of what could happen, what could have been, why you don't, this, that, and the other. And so she pushed them toward me for the disciplinary aspect so they can understand. But me and her, we had also agreed with the girls as they got older, I never put a hand on them. We were not going to teach them that it was acceptable for a man to put their hands on them. We embedded that in them early in life, because if their father's not doing it, no other man had that. So you don't accept that from any other man. So we laid out all the rules. Everybody sat down at the dinner table together. This is what you're going to do. I didn't grow up that way. We got our plates. We went and sat. We did whatever. Everybody sat down at the dinner table today. And today, that was one of the most profound times that we had as a family. They got to talk about the issues and things of that nature. And we had an agreed, me and my wife, that we weren't going to interrupt. Even though we heard some stuff that made your skin crawl, made you go, ooh, we knew we had to deal with it offline. And a lot of times the kids would police one another. They would police one another, but gave them, and right today, as grown as they are with their own kids, because we set that template early in life, they would still call us today to talk about issues because we allowed them to talk about things and not look down on them, not berate them, even though they got corrected later, but it wasn't in front of their siblings, and it was in a way that you didn't took it to the Lord, so you knew how to convey your thoughts and concern to them. Go ahead, William.
Wow.
You know, when you say, well, I wanted to
Go ahead.
backtrack and put one thing in there, because one thing I learned later on was the importance of having to sit down one-on-one with my kids and ask them. I asked them this question: is there anything that you're carrying around with you that I've done that you're still carrying around? You haven't been able to get rid of it or not forget it or pass it over. I said, because there's something I've done. Let's talk about it and let me gain your forgiveness and let me have opportunity to confess it.
That's good. That's good.
Wow. So how did they respond to that?
Good.
Well, I would have I'd usually take my daughter on a date and I would say, how you doing in school? You know, the regular things. And then I would get around to it a few minutes into the meal. I would just say, is there anything that you and I need to talk about that you're carrying around with you? And sometimes Christina would say something and sometimes say, no, I think I'm okay, Dad. I think so. But she was a little bit more secretive and protective of her personal life. And it got her into some trouble. Whereas Carl, he would tell me everything. I mean, if he thought something, if he had a question about, you know, puberty or growing up or anything about that, he was all about talking about it. But my daughter was very secretive, even from her mom, and it got her into some problems. But to this day, Christina will talk about some things because she knows the lesson she's learned with her own kids that she didn't do with me.
Wow. Wow.
Parents, fathers, our help meters help me for a reason. And my wife used to tell me sometimes, baby, you missed it on that one. You know, I used to go to my children early in life and ask them, I'm sorry I missed it. I used to ask them for forgiveness early. So I'm glad you shared that, Pastor.
Yes.
But she helped me with that. And when I mentioned earlier about dying to self, I died to certain places as a disciplinarian, things of that nature, to understand that they were just little people. They were people that needed to be, when you did them wrong or you made a wrong decision, you need to ask them for forgiveness. And I know that's not a popular concept with parenting and things of that nature, but it is vital to their well-being. So thanks for sharing that.
Yes, thank you. And Bishop Scott, right before I was gonna chime in on my journey as a father, I was gonna ask you to talk a little bit about that blended family, and you did that. So we on one accord. I have enjoyed being a father and a good portion of it because I married a great woman who loves God, and she's a great mother. We learned that one of the greatest things we can do for our children as men is to love their mother. And if you're not married to her and you got one of those kind of situations, you just respect me. You should have heard some things today, what to say and what not to say on behalf of the other biological parent. I have to say that I've understood a lot more about God when I became a father than before, because I had a good father, good grandfather, and I also, I won't get a chance to talk about him, also a great grandfather who was my mother's father. He died when I was in about middle school back in the 70s. But anyway, there was like, okay, so I'm looking at 4 generations by the time, you know, Papa Vance, as we called him, went to be with the Lord. But when I became a father, you read all these things in the Bible about being a father, and then you become a father, and those scriptures end up humbling you. my prayer life increased. You learn, and my prayer, Diane and I's prayer was this: Lord, help us mirror you as parents. The same type of parent that you are to us, help us be that to our children. And then we were around some tremendous people of God that taught us things like, your kids are going to be PKs, preachers' kids. So we learned that we didn't want to reach other kids and lose our own.
Wow.
So we always, spent time with them. My dad would go shoot baskets with me in the backyard. So, I'll come home and play with the kids. We just carved out family time. And since my parents and Diane's parents wanted them to know who their people were, our kids know their aunts and uncles and first cousins. We would intentionally go visit them. And we didn't say, well, they ain't coming to visit. We would just go visit them anyway. And we wanted you to know who your grandparents were. And I'm blessed. And two things, and I'll probably close out here, and we'll be, because there ain't enough time, but there's enough time to say what needs to be said. My wife and I basically learned, if you grow up in a home where you're loved and your needs are met and you're introduced to God, basically half your battles in life are over. There's just some things that, while you're not perfect, you won't have to contend and struggle with. Yeah. And you won't go out searching for things in the wrong places, because you're loved, your needs are met, and then there's morality and ethics and a sense of doing what's right because God has been introduced to your life. The last thing I like to say is I've learned these 4 C's. I got them from Bob Lepine, Family Life. Bob just retired after 28 years of being on Family Life. He talked about these 4 C's in parenting. We begin as caregivers, then we become cops, and then coaches, and then consultants. And when we're caregivers, the kids are small, we're taking care of them. We go from the diaper to the early age, the toddler, early elementary. And then we become the cop, where you get in trouble, we got to lock you up. A little bit more of a disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. A lot of that, they're growing up, and, some of the tension that comes natural because they're trying to spread out and, be themselves. And, that's appropriate in its own way. So we become the cop. And then we switch over to being the coach, where, we get to coach you now. We've gotten through that part and this part, we talk about this as like a family life cycle. And then, when the kids that we're all in now, we have grown kids and grandkids, we become the consultant. And I've learned from both of you that, you just don't tell your kids stuff. You got to do a lot more praying and talking and listening. And you wait. I learned this from Bishop and Pastor Angie, Bishop's wife. You wait now until the kids ask you something. You don't let them go off and then you jump in and say, because a lot of times we've been there. We've seen it. We know what to do, but you gotta, and yes. And then let them. And then we pray that, we know when that journey is a snake bite. Now that's when I got to say something. But a lot of times that journey is, well, okay, they're gonna be all right. Let's just be quiet and pray and wait for them to ask. So, I'm learning more to enjoy the consultant's role. And I do want to say, Pastor Tom and both Bishop, they got me by a few years, not a lot. But I do want to say, you need some men in your life who living right. They're not perfect, but they're just great examples. And they're going to tell you stuff that you need to hear. You might not all the time want to hear it, but it's what you need to hear. Our fathers did that with us. So we all need spiritual fathers. Both of these men, even though we work together in ministry and, in a way, we call ourselves friends because we are. That's a part of our relationship. But there's a spiritual father element to me and Tom Cacadelis. There's a spiritual father element to me and Ronald Scott. So you're my spiritual fathers. And, we hang out and talk sports and, laugh and joke. And I enjoy the friendship part, but also enjoy the part where you do an impartation into my life, because I still doing an impartation into other people's life. I teach a fathering class through the Eastern Pregnancy Center where our daughter works. And both of y'all know Agape and what she does, And so they do stuff with the mothers and the babies that they're trying to save, but they're fathers. So now I'm able to come alongside her in ministry and say, hey, these dads need to go through a fathering class. Now, the nice thing about it is sometimes that's court ordered. That's okay, because now you're gonna be a willing student. And even for the ones I've had, it's been great. So I get to actually teach a fathering class, but then with the young men, I'm mentor, so I get to pass on some of the very things that you've talked about, what your dads do, and what our dads did, and other men in our life. So I thank you. Listen, folks, we are actually out of time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Pastor Tom Cacadelis, and his wonderful wife, Linda Lynn, who's a great woman. Y'all ought to know now behind all of us is just great women. Thank you, Bishop Ronald Scott, and with him is Pastor Angela Scott, tremendous woman. Linda Lynn, tremendous woman. And then I thank God for my wife, Diane, tremendous woman. So part of being a great father is, if you are married and God has blessed you with that great wife, as Bishop said, they are a helpmeet for a reason. Listen to them. Gentlemen, we got to do this
Bless
again.
you.
I appreciate you. Good.
This is so rich.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank
Good.
you
This
for
is so rich. Thank you for sharing your heart, being transparent. Appreciate it. And this will be part 2 of episode 14. I want to say to all of our viewing audience, go look at the website. We've got a product available called Marital Investment, the Cards, which is a tool for you to share and learn and communicate and have fun and discuss things and all that. It's at the website. So bless you. Love you all. Thank you again, gentlemen. I love the Lord, and I love these 2 men that are on the screen.